for coming to the session on creating an environment for engagement and innovation. My name is Jennifer Sang. I'm the Executive Director for the Fung Institute for Engineering Leadership at the College of Engineering on campus. I've been working on this campus longer than I care to admit. And basically, in my former life, I was a chemical engineer. I got my MBA at the Haas School of Business right across the street. And since then, I haven't worked in the real world, and I just stayed on campus running degree programs, working in admissions, student services, operations, projects, capital projects, you name it, I've done it. So I've been very fortunate throughout my career at Cal to have really great mentors and managers who've really let me explore all those areas and kind of helped me find my niche, if you will. And so I've kind of landed where I need to land, which is as executive director for the Institute, I'm kind of the chief operating officer, so really overseeing all of the finance, operations, strategy for the Institute. And this is where I landed, and this is where I feel really, really great and comfortable. And along the way, I've become a manager, and I've managed many different kinds of teams of different kinds of people, and I've learned a lot along the way. So I'm really here to, about today's session is really to share best practices of what I've learned and what has worked for me along the way. I'm not an academic. I'm not going to show you data or research or anything like that. This is best practices. It's what's worked in the real world, so I hope you'll take it that way. And that's really meant to inspire each other. And as we go through the session, I'll have you guys share with each other too, because I'm sure you guys have done things that work or don't work, and you just want more ideas from people, other people like you. I also just want to say there's no magic formula here. Even if I give you these best practices, I think you need to take them back and customize it to your group, to your management style, to your particular employee. There's no like A plus B equals C here. It's really, you're gonna have to make it your own. And then just the last point before I dive into the content is this session is geared towards managers, but I mean, these are good things to do even if you are an individual contributor and you wanna really help change and influence the culture of your team and your organization to be more engaged, more innovative, that kind of thing. Just a quick poll in the audience. Who here are managers? Okay, and who here are individual contributors? Okay, all right. Okay, there will be something for everybody, I promise. Okay, so being a manager is hard. You've got your own job, you've got your own deliverables, but you've got this team of people you also need to make sure that they're flowing and working effectively so that the team as a whole is really achieving the larger goals of the organization. But what the things I'm talking to you about, I mean, why this is important, why you're here, is that I've seen that when you implement these kinds of practices, the return on investment is huge. You got better performing employees, you got a better jiving team, morale goes up, you get a lot of more great ideas, the level of the work of the team goes up, and just greater organizational alignment. I want to share a story with you. My husband is a caregiver in a senior home. He's been working in this job for about maybe four to 5 years, in that range. And since the beginning of his tenure in his particular organization, he has gone through about 6 or 7 managers. So the turnover rate of his managers have been horrible. He's had a string of horrible managers, which is probably the whole turnover issue. And he comes home and he complains to me every day, and he's like, I don't understand what value managers provide. I go, I vent my issue, they don't care, they're more worried about the bottom line, they don't care about the employees, or you know, they did something wrong and it's not operating efficiently, and some people are getting away with stuff and others are not, and bad behavior is going unchecked. And he complains to me all the time, and he kind of like has this kind of very like anti-manager kind of mentality. And me as a manager, I'm like, well, babe, you know, not all managers are bad. Managers do provide value. And what's really funny is his most current manager who started maybe a few months ago has been off the charts outstanding. She hears the concerns of her employees. She's really managing the operations well, and things are really singing now. And he's like, oh, I get it. now I see, you know. And so I had put this little picture on my slide to show, like, if you're doing it right, everybody's swimming in the right direction, it's all good. And if it's not, you're all like swimming against each other. And so I'm hoping that you'll see that if you try to invest in these things over the long run, you'll get that everybody swimming in the right direction kind of flow. Okay, so why don't we take a second? So for a couple times during the session, I'm going to have you talk to your neighbors in your vicinity to share some examples. So why don't you just take a moment right now to introduce yourself, your name, and what department you work in, just to like introduce yourself to your neighbors in your vicinity. No, it's great. I do want you to talk, and we'll get into that. So let me just dive into a few of the principles, and then I'm going to have you guys talk to each other about it. So these are 3 principles that I feel are really important to embed in the work culture. Whether you're an individual contributor, whether you're a manager, I think this is just good practices for employees and everybody in general. So number 1 is fostering respect in the workplace. And the four things that I mean by that are transparency, courtesy, reliability, and accountability. So let me explain that a little bit. Transparency, so I once walked into a team who the morale was low, there was this sense of us, the staff, versus the employees and the rest of the larger organization and leadership. And I'm going to guess that in the environment on campus, there's some of that going around. And so I once walked into a team like that, and they also didn't even trust each other. It was a very difficult situation to walk into. But by instilling, as I walked in as a manager, really working to foster respect in the workplace, really helped them to start trusting each other and the manager, me, and the organization again. So by transparency, I mean, so in that situation I just referred to, you know, they felt like things just came down on them. Policies and changes came down on them without a lot of explanation. And so I made it very much a part of our regular staff meetings and in my communications with all the employees that, you know, kind of what was going on in the bigger picture and the rationales behind some of these policy changes or other changes. And once they started understanding and seeing kind of, and I gave them that view into what the larger picture was, it really softened the like, oh, they're out to get us kind of mentality. So I think this is what I mean by transparency. Courtesy, you know, we're all forced into a team together, not always by choice. And you don't have to love each other, but you have to be nice to each other. And really instilling that, like, you got to be civil and you got to be courteous. That's bottom line. Toxic behavior, never productive in the workplace. Reliability, really instilling this value in your staff that we are in it together. So if you don't do your part, you're letting us all down. We're doing this together. And again, really instilling that principle. And then accountability, being tough but fair. When I walked into that team that I spoke about, I think there were various performance levels I walked into. There were some people who were fabulous, some people not so fabulous. And of course, the hard part as a manager is, right, you're trying to normalize that kind of performance distribution. But I was always, when I walked into that, very tough but fair. So I would say I would be tough on the people for sure who had the performance that needed to come up, but I would still, implement the same principles and still be fair towards everyone. And once everyone started seeing that, I had a standard that was put across everyone, whether you were a high performer or a lower performer or whatever. That built trust in me that, like, I wasn't playing favorites and I wasn't, that kind of thing. And so, and we could share more examples together about those kinds of things, but kind of in general, fostering this kind of respect in the workplace. The second principle, encouraging open dialogue and innovation. So getting input from everyone, even the people who tend to be more quiet in meetings, that kind of thing. Trying stuff out, because how are you ever going to move and get to new levels if you don't try stuff? And in trying stuff, of course, again, you have to mitigate the risk. You have to take calculated risks. Like, you have to be able to try something and be able to make mistakes and be able to learn from it. And I know that's particularly hard in our campus environment, but I've definitely, and I'll give you some concrete examples for me how I've done that. So let me just, I brought some props. All right, so currently at my staff meeting, I have staff meetings every 2 weeks. And we begin each staff meeting with giving out awards. And I've developed 3 awards because these are the behaviors I want to encourage in the staff and for them to look for in each other and recognize and nominate and award for on a regular basis. So the pom-poms are for whoever has really kind of helped out a team member, really boosted morale through whatever they've done. So that's 1 prize and 1 behavior I'm trying to encourage. The Make It Work wand is for whoever pulled out their magic, hustled, made it work despite all the obstacles and got it done. That's this. And then kind of along with my idea of innovation is, and I encourage innovation, is the Bright Idea Award, the light bulb. And that is for whoever came up with an awesome new idea and, whether we implement it or not, at least came up with it and we may or may not be implementing it. And so that kind of thing, these are the 3 behaviors I want the staff to have on a regular basis and see in each other and nominate each other on a regular basis. So this helps, again, encouraging innovation. The other thing I tried to do, again, in that team I told you about where I walked in and everyone was really not trusting of each other and the manager or whatever, when I walked in there, because of that dynamic, everyone would bring issues to me directly. Instead of the more minor issues, them resolving it amongst themselves, they wouldn't even talk to each other. And I said, this is a problem. And so in addition to my every other week kind of staff meeting kind of thing, I asked that on the weeks that we were not meeting all together, that they would meet by themselves. So I used to call them genless meetings because they're without me. And so they would have these genless meetings and I would encourage them to talk about their various projects and their various issues and see if they could resolve it amongst themselves. And that really broke down the barriers for them to talk through their own issues instead of, again, always escalating to me. But also, they started generating ideas themselves and really working through and taking their own projects to the next level because they were able to tap in to the rest of the team and get their ideas in a safe environment. Again, just in case they felt like me, the manager, kind of stifles their innovation. So I did give them an outlet for them to kind of also generate their own ideas and innovation amongst themselves. Let's see, and then the third part is having fun. This is a very, very important point in my managerial style. I have always instilled having fun as I manage teams. You spend so many hours in the day with these people. They're like your second family. So if you can't have a little fun while you're working hard and playing hard, there's no point to being here in my mind. And I've done a lot of different kinds of things with different staffs, social stuff, games, competitions, creative stuff. I'll show you, I just wanted to show you a few pictures of what I've done with my current staff. And by the way, these are all no or low cost things. There are no major resources involved in this other than dedicating the time and effort to it. But there on the top right corner, we had teams and we were doing Office Olympics. So what they're doing there is we had a stack of plastic cups and they were shooting rubber bands to try to knock down the cups. We do lots of crafts on our staff because we tend to have a lot of crafty people, but this was us decorating pumpkins at Halloween. We took an afternoon in the summer to reward ourselves and we went to an A's game. This was this gentleman's retirement party and he wanted to have a picnic in the park and then we played board games. We were playing Heads Up. And it's just so simple and super fun. And I actually I feel like the greatest compliment that I could receive from this gentleman as he retired about a month ago. And he said, I'm retiring, I've worked for many, many years. He's like, but I really remember this team and this organization the most because we've had the most fun and bonded the most through everything you've done. And he's like, and honestly, he goes, and this guy was on my interview committee when I started, he goes, when you started telling me about having fun, he's like, I was really skeptical. I don't know about this fun stuff. And every time we kind of roped him into all of our fun activities, he's like, you know what? I get it now. And he's like, I will remember this team forever. So it works. I'm telling you, it works. Okay. So now that I've shared a few things with you guys, what I want you to do is I want you to take a moment and reflect yourself on some of these things that you do well and some of the things you would love more ideas on. Because I bet you, all of you have some really good experience amongst yourself, but there's some other things that you would want some knowledge about as well. So take a moment to think about it, and then I'm going to have a few minutes where you share with one person on one side of you, and then we'll do it, and we'll share on another person on the other side of you, and then we'll like chat out some really great examples in a few minutes. So. Well, I'll give you a minute to reflect right now. All right, so if you are ready, why don't you share with the person on your right or closest to your right? Or, you know, or find one neighbor to share with, and then you find the other neighbor. If we could wrap up the individual conversations, I'd love for us to start sharing with the larger group. So Nicole has a mic, but there's also a mic back there. Can we start getting some volunteers, maybe share some of the cool things that they learned? Yeah, I see you right there. I don't know if we can hear you, but let's see.
I had one of the areas that I would like to strengthen on our team is the having fun part. But that can be a challenge in kind of really stressful work environment, like really high demanding. At the end of the day, people want to go home and see their friends and family. They don't necessarily want to keep staring at my face. I think everybody on our team is fun, but there's just not a culture. And there's also this outside perception of other departments or people on staff of, okay, if you guys are using work time to do those things, then there's stuff that needs to get done here. Like, how can you take the time out to do that? And how do we make that shift to saying, like, this is part of being an efficient, strong team?
That is a very good question, and I'm sure several people share that concern with you. It is, and instilling something as part of the culture, right, is not a one-time thing. It has to be a regular thing so that people understand and get it. Like, so personally, like, so on the team I'm currently on, we do it once a month. It's not every day, it's not every week, it's once a month. And sometimes it happens over the lunchtime anyway. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it's an event that takes, more than an hour. But over time, and even as I said, there were people who were skeptical of my approach to having fun at work as I began. But as I made that a regular thing built in every month, and it was a thing, I saw people getting their work done so they could go have the fun, because they did want to have the fun, and they really then started getting into it and really wanted to join, and really, so it's not something that happens overnight, and it's something that you do have to plan and try to build in a way, of course, understanding these constraints about the work needs to get done and perception and that kind of thing, but it can be done. Again, you just have to build it and customize it. Of course, your circumstances are slightly different than mine. Does anyone else have a perspective or some tips to, I'm sorry, what was your name?
My name's
Julia. Julia, does anyone else have a perspective? Yes, in the back.
So we do a quarterly celebration, right, which happens at lunchtime, and then we extend the hour. So 12 to 2, we do a quarterly celebration, and we ask our teams to volunteer to plan the quarterly celebration. So not only is it fun, right, but it gives people an opportunity to work together who might not ordinarily work together, or people who might be challenged working together to work on something that's a little more fun than their regular work. So it really helps improve relationships amongst the team. And I hear you on the frequency part of it, which is why we do it quarterly. And so, and then the other thing we talked about, I think you do something similar, right? But a lot of it centers around food, which is why lunchtime is a great idea. So like our last quarterly celebration, we did a macaroni and cheese cook-off. And so who doesn't love macaroni and cheese, right? And everybody got to bring their dishes in. And so a little rivalry, a little bit of fun, and an opportunity to really team build. So just one example of a way to maybe have a little fun and tie it to the goals of your group.
Yeah. We have one up here. Yeah. I'm sorry? In the beginning, I actually had to put in a lot of the elbow grease because, again, I was trying to do this and set this culture and norm. But once people, again, started getting into it, we've all been kind of taking turns for the most part. Granted, there are some people who will never plan an event, and there'll always be those on every team. But I think I've definitely taken on less responsibility than I did in the beginning, and people were more willing now to keep it up once the momentum got built up. So. Yeah.
Thank you. So just in relation to time, I'm usually the person who plans the event. I'm that fun person. I think they think so.
Okay.
But how we do it in terms of time is each of the managers, they are the project sponsor of the event. So their name is tied to it, but each time it's a different one. So it's not put on one person. It's this supervisor this time, it's this team lead this time, and we make it happen. Different people plan it, and it's very different because it varies based on who's on the committee. So it can be a committee that meets 1 hour every third week for three sessions, and that's how we make it happen.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else want to share some best practices? It could be around this area or any of the other ones.
Hi.
Yeah.
This is less best practices, but something that we talked about in terms of challenge. And it's a little bit related to your points, but it definitely is related to the theme of the day and the moments earlier this morning at the plenary. And that is just how to create a context where managers can talk or encourage staff to talk openly about their larger career visions and how this particular job plays within that longer arc, and how I certainly, fairly new to manager position, haven't gone there really, to be quite frank. And I'm interested in doing that, but in a way that, of course, doesn't project some message like, okay, whatever, when are you moving on or something? That would be the worst case example. So I'm interested in that topic because I've never had a manager relate to me in that way, and ask questions or really, about the skills I want to build and how I see those fitting into my future.
I'm actually going to address that in the next part. Yeah. Yeah, right here.
Hi, I just want to let everyone know about a campus resource that we have. Someone who's helping us with process improvement. Her name is Delia Clark, and you're nodding, a lot of people know her. She is helping our group with innovation and transparency and communication. We're analyzing our processes, and she has a whole methodology for doing it, and I think it's been really beneficial for innovation and communication. And it's at the she starts with the people that are actually involved, not from the top down. So I think that it's really helpful. So if you're working on your process improvement and want some consulting, we have it for no charge. So.
Well, yeah, what department is this?
BPI? Wait, what's it called? Top. Yeah, I know. Just Delia Clark. Just like, because her department does change. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Delia Clark. DELIA, and then Clark with no E. Yeah, she's great.
Great. Thanks for sharing.
I hope you.
Her email's going to blow up tomorrow. Other things you want to share or ask? Yeah. Have you tried alternating, and is that not effective? We've done that. Yeah. But then it's not the whole. Then it becomes kind of siloed, where HR and this financial services tend to come to one at Fourth Street and already comes to the one on campus. And there's not a lot of intermingling, which is what I'm going for. I see. IT is on campus too for those colleagues, so yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah. Does anybody have any good ideas? Here.
Hello. I can't take credit for it, but someone in our office did a trivia contest. So you would submit a fun fact about yourself, and then she had brackets and things like that, so that you could be online. Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah. So.
Great. Yeah, that's a great idea. I do find that things like competition and games, somehow in everyone there's a little bit of competition in them, and doing it, and whether virtually or live, usually gets people really engaged and pumped. That's my observation. Okay. If there are no other ones, one more over here. Yeah.
Well, I think all these are great ideas, and I do feel like I institute a lot of encouragement of things to do, and we were talking about some of the challenges with the social aspect of the fun part. One of the things that I run up against is we have staff with all kinds of alternating schedules, and if we have something at lunch, some people are gone by then, or if we have something after work, people are already at home by then, so how would you, and then there's also the issue of if you want to institute something, you do have to get buy-in from your supervisor, right? So what if that's not encouraged? Or there's if they don't want to be involved, and if the top down isn't encouraging it, then at your level, how are you then to implement it and bring it, you still have to get I'm asking you, did you have any problems putting all these things into place, or do you have to get approval for things like that?
I think those are very good questions. Hey, it's not easy to have fun, let me tell you. It is work to have fun, okay? So yes, let me address some of the things. So for example, on my team, we're pretty flexible. Some people do come in early, some people do come in later, as you're saying. Some people try to get home ASAP to be with their families. I also have people working from home sometimes one day a week. And so we do manage it such that we do require at least one day in the week where we all agree that no one's working from home, and that's the day we have our staff meetings, and that's the day probably that we'll have our fun that month or whatever as well. So I think that's just about managing kind of your overall operations and accessibility, availability of your staff. But for us, that's how we're very flex, but we do make one day a week, like everybody's got to be in the office, and this is when we do a lot of our meetings and that kind of thing. Your comment about getting buy-in from the top, that's a very good one. I have been very fortunate to have supportive managers. In my current situation, my manager doesn't want to have a lot to do with the fun. It's not his thing, but he doesn't inhibit it. So he's like, you can go do it, fine, whatever. I'm just not gonna come. I'm like, okay. I'm not, I mean, you know, again, I'm not going to force anyone if they don't want to come, that's fine. But it is absolutely a challenge, because if you do wind up having a supervisor who is like dead set against it, that is going to be a huge barrier to overcome. And I don't have a magic answer for you on that, but I think, you know, I think if you try to do at least some things and try to introduce it slowly and show the benefit of it, then, you know, I think people would get more open-minded, and then, you know, hopefully then open the door for a more regular part of the culture here. Yes, a question, or you want to respond? Yeah. Offer some tips.
So in terms of some of these barriers, I think, you know, we're talking about social cultural change. And it's so funny that everyone has a hard time making this fun thing happen. And everybody has always known it's a good part of the mix. But anyway, for me, and I'm still working on it, I want to run a little pilot project. It's just a tester to see how it works, and when scheduling is a problem, I think you have to overcome the desire to get it perfect the right time and make it work for everybody the right time, because maybe you just run one for the naturally existing groups, and we'll run a couple, and we'll do different activities, and we're gonna experiment, and then hopefully if it works and the smaller groups that are already groups like it, and we'll advocate for more of it and say, wouldn't this be great if we all were doing it? Okay, well, why can't that happen? What would it take to make it happen? So in my work, I rarely have a long-term program. It's always like we're in pilot mode, because we're always trying to get a little better and try new things.
That's amazing, and that goes along with the other thing I was
getting
saying.
buy-in.
You gotta try stuff, right? You don't know
Yeah.
until you try stuff. It could not work. It could be a mistake, and you could try to move on and learn and do something else.
Yeah, and when you're proposing it to your upper, it's just
Yeah.
like, let's run a little pilot. Let's try it this year, and no long-term commitment. So.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great attitude. All right, I'm going to move into the next part of my presentation, and then we're going to do a second round of all of this. So, okay, so this is my second set of engagement and innovation principles, and this is more from the manager level. And so let me dive into it a little bit. Okay, so know your people. You know, it's one thing, obviously, you have all these employees, but I find that if you really dive into each person's strengths and weaknesses and learn to work with it and balance it so that people complement each other, it's pretty effective in terms of, you know, so for example, right, if one person is like less detail oriented and more creative, and then you have another person on the team who is way more detail-oriented but not as creative. Sometimes pairing those kinds of people and knowing all the strengths and weaknesses and then putting the pieces together, depending on your project, can really make it work. So, I mean, really getting to know your people and what they're good at and what they're not good at, and then being able to work with that is huge. Secondly, regular feedback. So, I think most people, right, the performance evaluation cycle once a year, that's where you get your major feedback. But I think just doing it once a year as a manager is not fair to anyone, because I think people need to know on a regular basis over the projects that they do, over the year, and over everything in working on a daily basis. You have to create a culture of regular feedback, both positive and for improvement, such that it's not viewed as this tense, one-time performance evaluation cycle type event. And by creating that regular feedback, I mean, it really encourages the innovation piece of the culture I'm trying to talk about, because again, you're giving real-time feedback on a project, you're giving real-time feedback on an issue, so that gets addressed and we can move on and do a new thing, or that, and just, it brings the level of the work up. Third, check in on employees about their lives, not just their work. Sometimes you learn stuff about them, like you may think like, oh my God, they're quirky or whatever, I don't understand why they do things this way. And sometimes you learn why based on who they are as people. So they're investing and really knowing your people, strengths, weaknesses, their personal lives. It really would help you then tailor how you can help manage your employee and get them more engaged. So let me give you an example. So on this one team that I had, over the course of a year, I learned kind of where the strengths and weaknesses of my various employees were. And we all, and there was no shame in it, we all knew that there was an area of improvement that each person had. So like for example, one person, she tended to take on too many projects and kind of overpromised and underdelivered sometimes. So she had a problem really juggling all these responsibilities. She wanted to help a lot. And we agreed, when we talked through, it's like, you gotta know where your limits are, you gotta learn how to juggle things better. I had another employee who, needed to be a little bit better on the customer service front. She needed to do a little more hand holding, needed to work on that area, and she knew it and whatever. So every person on that team had an area that we talked about and they knew, and again, it wasn't a secret from the rest of the team that they needed to work on. And so what I did is I got prizes for each of those people. So for example, for the person who needed the greater customer service help, I got her a hand. It was a massage hand. For the person with the juggling ball, juggling the projects, I got her juggling balls. And so each person had a goal prize. And basically we worked, and I said to the entire team, like, look, each of us has our own professional development area we need to work on. You need to work better on project management, you need to work better on customer service. But so each of you has this prize, and over the year we are gonna work together, both with the team and with me, to make sure that we're doing things, or you're taking classes, or working towards this goal. And when I feel like you've earned it, you will get the prize. And so this also became kind of a little bit, again, of this kind of competition, like, oh, I want my prize. And so each person on the team earned their prize anywhere from 6 months to probably a year and a half after I launched it. But again, it was just this weird, small, tangible thing that they're like, okay, I need to work on it, I need to earn it. And I mean, it was incredible how that worked. And again, everyone's performance improved, and they were really engaged in trying to work towards that kind of goal. All right, secondly, invest in your people. And this was going to some of the stuff you were talking about. It is so important to encourage learning and professional development amongst your staff. And again, this is not a one-time thing. It's something that you have to instill on a regular basis as part of the culture. So every time you do a performance evaluation, or every time, or whatever level you check in with your various employees, there needs to be some regular level of like, and I do this with everyone. So like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so everyone has, hopefully, most people do have a longer term goal. And I always say, well, what things do you need to get there? Both, do you need to take a class? You need to learn some stuff. Would you like to try a project in an area, maybe not immediately on your own, but a project, work that needs to be done within the team and the organization that maybe is not in your immediate purview, but maybe you'd like to try. And I try to have that on a regular basis to kind of see, and also if you're doing number one and you do know your people, you kind of can help steer where some of that goes. So for example, I walked into a team where there was this person who, based on getting to know him in the first 6 months, I found him to be extremely bright, great potential, but on the kind of lazier, minimal effort kind of side. And I just talked to him and I was like, well, what is it that you want to be when you grow up, and where? And he's like, well, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. I like things in this area, not in this area. I'm like, okay. I was like, how can I help you get there in the long run? And so to your point, it's not about like, I'm gonna get you out of here, but it's just kind of like, how can I assist you achieve this larger goal? There were some classes, he took some classes, but I said, you know what? I think you could do better, and I think you could do these things, and I'm going to push you. You may not like it at times, but I'm going to push you, and I'm going, because I know you could do better, and I see a lot of potential in you. So I'm going to give you these things that maybe you may be really uncomfortable with to begin with, but I think from what I could see, I think you could do it, and I think it could help you get to this thing that you're talking about. And I did that over the year. I pushed him and his and I hate to say it as laziness, but you're kind of always trying to do the minimal effort. I kept pushing him and kind of to do these other projects, to try something new and to be a little bit uncomfortable. And over the year, he really grew his performance, and he started really growing into it. He started really seeing the potential he could achieve, and he started achieving so much and really growing. And so the area I'm talking about is he was, he's an administrative person, but I sensed in him a really great creative side, and so I really had him work on a lot of marketing projects. And he really just blossomed into it, and he really, and at the end of the year, he said, you know what? You were totally a pain in my butt at times, and I know you kept, but he's like, I needed that, and I'm so glad that you pushed me, because like I see it now, and so that's just an example of being able to do that. The third aspect of that, again, of course, is recognizing accomplishments. People always want to feel appreciated for what they do. There's no substitute for it. Okay, the last one is recruiting on non-teachable qualities. And by those non-teachable qualities, I mean judgment, character, attitude, cultural fit, and flexibility. So what I mean by this is when you're recruiting, of course, the number one thing people are looking for, work experience, relevant background and experience for the job. Of course, that's always number one. But when, most people, when they come to you, there's pros and cons. And I think that when you're recruiting, it's important that they fit in culturally with your team. I don't think that, because the problem is, so for example, if you're choosing between someone who has, say, they do have experience in a particular Berkeley system, and we all know some of the Berkeley systems are gnarly, and having that experience and hitting the ground running is always a plus. But they're not quite the cultural fit, or they have a little bit of character attitude issue, versus someone who, say, is new to the university, doesn't have experience, but is a perfect cultural fit for what you're trying to do for your team and your organization. I would actually choose the person with the cultural fit, because to me, while it may take me longer to train that person on the Berkeley systems, you could train somebody on the Berkeley systems. You can't change somebody's attitude. You can't change the way they fit into your group. So that's what I mean by that. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking, and we're going to do another round of sharing. So same thing, kind of, and now just again, write these three principles. If you think about what you've done, some good examples around it, or which ones you would love some help in. And then kind of we'll do 2 rounds of sharing, and then we'll share with the larger group. Okay, let's bring it back, and let's share. Yes, Sharon. Oh.
We had a discussion about having a really honest appraisal about the job description, though, and the work that needs to get done. So, for example, I'm currently hiring for a coordinator position in my area. I'm at the School of Optometry, and the shelf life of that job is 2 to 3 years, and then you have job mastery. And so I say that to candidates, and I say that ultimately to whomever comes into that role, like, this is a great entry-level position at the university. This is a great entry-level position to have exposure to higher education, but you're going to be done in about 2 to 3 years because you're going to have job mastery. And so whoever's in that role, we do have conversations about what is the next step after this, what do you want to do, what kind of training. But I think sometimes that there's a danger that when we have really good people, we're afraid to let them go. So sometimes we start altering the job at hand or the work at hand because we want to build it around that person, which if we have some flexibility, I think that that can be a great way of retaining people. But at the same time, we need to make sure that the work at that level needs to get done as well. So just because someone doesn't like part of their job description, you can't necessarily say, well, you don't have to do that anymore and I'm going to raise you up. Maybe sometimes it just is time for that person to move on to the next level or the next step. And so I think that, I do weekly one-on-ones with my team as well, and we always have a sidebar conversation sometimes about what is your next step, what do you need to do to get there, so that it's not a surprise someday when they leave me or they ask me to provide a reference. And thankfully I've had a team of people who have worked for me who still stay in touch. So
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, this is great. I mean, and you're absolutely right. We too also try to kind of, for the more entry level positions, just kind of be upfront with candidates when we interview. Just say it is an entry level job. It is what it is. So yeah.
I don't want someone who wants to sit in that job forever and ever. I want someone who's ambitious and who understands that this is a great springboard for their career here at the university because of exposure to so many different things.
Yeah, totally. What else did you talk about? Yes, in the back.
So we talked about quite a few things, but I think one of the things that really resonated with the group is we talked about taking meetings outside of the office to get to know people. So we do a lot of walking meetings where we just walk around campus because it gives you an opportunity to engage with people in a different way than you would if you're sitting on the opposite side of the desk.
Totally.
So it gives you, just like I said, a different way to kind of get to know who your staff is. And it's really important to know those people who don't want to talk about their personal lives. Like, that's also important to know too, is that there are people who, like I have staff who have very strong boundaries around that and they don't want to bring the personal into work. So yes, it's important to get to know them and to know their boundaries as well.
Yep. Great. Other things. What else did people talk about? Yeah, right here.
I hate to talk twice, but I think there should be some more talking.
Okay.
We were talking about the weaknesses, and that we often work so hard to cover weaknesses. I really appreciate your point of being transparent in the weaknesses and actually building it in. I share it with my partner that we have a program where a project is not complete until the weaknesses are identified as well. So it's not blaming, it's part of the project. Everybody has weaknesses, and we want those out and transparent.
Great. Yes, thanks. Great. Other things to share? Yeah, right here.
One of the things that I think kind of came out in both of our examples that stood out to me are also identifying kind of not just work style differences, but also generational differences as well, and just how that, like, working cross-generationally, of understanding what that culture looks like, and that what motivates me might be different than what motivates a different employee, and and for me, I talked a little bit about not letting my own fears of, like, okay, when somebody tells me to do something, I just put my head down and I get it done, whereas another employee that I work with wants to talk about it a little bit, or maybe frozen if they don't know what the next steps are because they don't want to be wrong, or and just identifying that and managing towards what their style is versus what your comfort level is.
Right. So it's about knowing and adapting appropriately. Yeah. Totally. Any other sharings? Yeah, right here.
One of the things that came up in our group, I think, was about being a manager and you sense someone's direction or they've articulated their direction, but maybe the necessity of turning professional development into, unfortunately, like an assignment, like a light suggestion that, oh, there's a couple of things that you could do. Don't get taken up on. And so it doesn't feel like necessarily a comfortable way to support growth and development, to turn it into an assignment, like choose two, and then let's, talk about them. But that's sometimes what it takes to get it done, to keep them moving. So I think we all kind of shared a little frustration in that process.
Yeah, No, and as with the fun, everything is work. Professional development is work. None of this is easy. It's an investment. So, yeah. Oh.
Just to follow up on that,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
I usually set one of the goals in the evaluation for the next eval period as a development piece. So it's either a class they need to take, certification, and not need to take, but want to take. So I talk to them about what their interests are and their growth areas, and that becomes a goal for them to reach as part of the evaluation.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, right here. This will be the last one, and we need to wrap it up.
Thanks.
Yeah.
One of the challenges has been to know how does one recruit for these non-teachable qualities. And the recruitment process in my department is, the open solicitation, the panel interview, but then usually beforehand, in order to vet before the panel interview, there are the phone interviews. Mm-hmm. So one could get some conversation, some more casual, informal conversation going that way to try and identify some of these characteristics. But then also what was suggested was to have, with each of the candidates, another informal meeting, maybe a coffee or something like that, where, once again, you're having that equal standard, but then based on the casual conversation that comes up, it's another way of getting that touch point of what that person's personality and what these different qualities are like. Because in my experience, it's really hard to get that out of a formal panel interview. That's a very, for lack of a better term, a contrived situation where everyone's going to show, their absolute best. So, if you let your hair down a little bit, maybe there's ways to discern some of these other qualities.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. It's certainly one way. I mean, I have found there are some questions and some things you can put into the kind of contrived panel interview, but you're correct. I mean, to some extent, there's only so much you can do with it. So. All right, well, we need to wrap it up. Sorry, I know we were all running late and, oops. So I just want to summarize, to instill these principles in your work culture and how you manage, it is an ongoing, not one-time effort that can, I think, yield really great results. You need to customize it, make it your own. And also, but it's important to help each other. I mean, I don't know that, if you'll continue talking to the people that you've met today, but I mean, it's really important to find other managers to bounce these kinds of ideas off of, and I'm certainly available, both after the session or whatever, that I'm happy to share with people, but build that network and bounce all those ideas off of other people. It's really helpful. With that, I'm going to conclude, and the session evaluations were given out to you, so please do fill those out. But thank you so much for coming to the session. Best of luck.